Hey everybody, thank you for joining us on this ChangeNerd webcast. We have Thomas Keehan. He is a quality and operational excellence executive with a long history in this enterprise change management game. Tom, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So Thomas, before we get into the content, tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, I worked for GE for 20 years, and that's where I got a lot of my experience in how to approach operational excellence. The one thing that they did really well is they started you off with something that they called the change acceleration program, change
Mhm.
acceleration process. And it really was something that just completely changed my approach to how to sustainably do this kind of work. Very people centric, and it's about the acceptance of change and how to overcome any kind of resistance and balance this technical, political, and cultural trifecta that you have
Yeah.
anytime you're trying to do any kind of big change. And then just throughout the years, I've just been doing it for different companies and did it with my own company for a little while, and then took a good challenge to do a good transformation with another company right now.
Yeah. Awesome. So let's get into it. Why are companies implementing operational excellence? What is it about operational excellence that's so attractive to organizations?
Yeah, that golden nugget is always, how do I improve productivity and save cost?
Mhm.
Inevitably, that's what people will come to, not realizing that one of the biggest impacts that you have by doing operational excellence is about time.
Yeah.
And when you start to free up time, then that gives you the ability to do something about productivity, but really about growth and innovation. So, how do I take my company to the next level, or how do I change what my product delivery, my information, my service delivery actually is? So, that's kind of one of the things that I think companies really need to start changing. And the successful companies have focused on that they've taken it from a time perspective. And we're seeing a lot of this kind of repetitive culture with operational excellence. And I think when you're focused on productivity and cost out, that tends to get you into that endless loop of the initiative over and over again.
Yeah, no, I would agree. That's the major theme that I'm hearing from a lot of organizations. And it's a well-known fact that GE had a heavy influence on operational excellence as a practice, as a discipline within companies. Tell us about your experience with GE.
Yeah, I'm really proud of what I did and what I learned with GE. I got into the very first of it back with a Six Sigma initiative back in 1995. We had Lean, and then we had this combination of Lean Six Sigma. It was really just outstanding. I was certified in many different types of belts and as a quality leader, and GE was really rocking and rolling with it. They got into the game early after kind of benchmarking who was doing well with Six Sigma. And then once they brought the lean aspect of it into the late 90s, it changed the game because it was about eliminating waste and not just optimizing the variation that you have in your processes. And
Yeah.
it worked out really, really well. I mean, it went for a long time. They did have a bit of a fault back in 2005, 6, 7, as they kind of gave it to the businesses and said, we no longer need to govern this from a corporate standpoint. And we had to reboot it in GE back in 2010,
Oh wow.
which helped it out a lot. But
So
I read a lot
it
of,
was managed centrally.
it was managed centrally at the start from GE corporate. And then, of course, the business units had their leadership in it as well. And then there was this time in 2000, like I said, 2006, 7, and 8, where we thought everybody's sustainable. We don't need to have that, kind of corporate governance anymore. And it didn't pay off too well. A lot of customers were saying, "Hey, what happened to that great, operational excellence approach and culture that you had?" And we had to restart it. And restarting it was really good. It really brought the full kind of package of what operational excellence was. And GE called it GE Advantage because it was the advantage that customers got by partnering with GE.
Oh
And it
wow.
worked really well. So it was very powerful, and it drove a lot of really great results and a lot of good growth in industries, and made GE very flexible in where they decided to, go into markets.
Yeah. Quick question. I was thinking about some things as you were speaking. would you call that program a leadership development program, or was it just to kind of upskill leaders and other, colleagues around operational excellence methodology and tools?
Yeah, great question. Great question. There was this leadership development curriculum aspect of it.
Awesome.
So the executives and the officers went through the program as well, and they went through a modified program of it. But really, there was this big part of it that was, we expect you to be the leaders of change. We expect you to be the leaders of problem solving as you went through all this. So there was most definitely a leadership, development curriculum part of it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah,
Yeah,
the GE was being very straightforward with saying that, kind of just stating the expectation. They expect them to be the leaders of change, right? Like
absolutely.
that's half the battle. That's awesome. Um,
Yeah.
so based on your experience, what are some of the core principles surrounding operational excellence, and how can companies determine or measure ROI from operational excellence investments?
Yeah, so it's my opinion, my approach that operational excellence is made up of four things. The very first one is, how do you accelerate change? And that's the people aspect of it. That's the thing I learned 3 months after I joined GE in 1993. And it's a very powerful methodology because it's what manages you from the current state to the future state, which we talk about a lot. This is actually a methodology that manages you through the transition state from current to future.
Mhm.
And that's all about people. How you get your stakeholders involved, how you understand what the big resistance are, how you are able to communicate what your change is and how people can accept it better. Then the next one is obviously lean, the elimination of waste. That it was very early on when I was doing a lot of this work with lean, and I kept getting asked, what's the acronym, for lean? And I finally just wrote out on the board one day, let's eliminate all nonsense. And that's really what lean is, because it's not just the elimination of waste, it's about the nonsense that you do inside of it.
Yeah.
And then you have the right problem solving methodology. So one of the great statements I learned from GE is, what problem are you trying to solve? And from that, you must use the right methodology. I have seen time again where companies attach themselves to one type of problem solving methodology, and it's not, the same tool for everything. So that's an important part, is to really understand the right methodology for the right problem. And then the last thing is, how do you take your data and make it visible and make it speak and tell the story of what you've done?
Yeah.
And that loops all the way back around to that accelerating change again, where you communicate back to the people that accepted your change and started working on it with you, to say, this is what we said we were going to go do. Here's the data that says we achieved the results that we did. And this is the benefit of why we did it. So it answers that ultimate question of, why are we doing what we're doing? And to me, that's the whole power of operational excellence.
Wow. Wow. So Tom, there's a lot of organizations that have an operational excellence group.
Hmm.
Some companies it's centralized, and other companies it's decentralized, where the resources are in other business units. Based on your experience, what would you recommend?
I really do believe that there's got to be that one central point, that one leadership part of it. How big it is, how much authority they have, how much responsibility they have. That's the cultural thing
Yeah.
that you need to figure out inside your business. But there's been this movement lately about companies wanting to have a chief data officer, which I love, right? It's a really good, powerful position that reports to the CEO. Really, I'm going to follow that right back up with, you need a chief problem solver, because that's really what operational excellence is. It's about leadership and problem solving. And
Yeah.
I think as long as you have someone as close to the top of the organization as you can, that's an unbiased view of what you're trying to do across the enterprise, that's the ticket. A lot of times this gets, put into manufacturing, or if you're an engineer to order business, into engineering. But the problem is it gets biased, right? And so having an enterprise-wide unbiased approach is really a good key to success.
That makes sense. That totally makes sense. In this role, would this role be temporary? Because I've thought about, does it make sense to have like a chief change officer? You know,
Yeah.
eh, if so, what are your thoughts? Would this be a temporary role or? Obviously, this was large organizations.
Yeah, so I've written a couple articles lately. One of them was your next operational excellence leader should be this, and it was really a summary of what that person should be.
Yeah.
The next one was, how do you get rid of the culture of repetitive problem solving? And I've seen in a couple companies where you know, I've seen the same problem being solved again and again with the starting at the same baseline that you did 4 years ago,
Yes.
where someone got certified as a black belt or a master black belt for doing the exact same project.
Yeah.
And to me, that's really just, it's just so much waste. So that sustainability of it is really what drives down from the top. And that's why I believe, whether it's a large organization or a small one, or even just one person, but that view from the top down, because you need that enterprise-wide approach and look, because all the things you might fix in manufacturing that are driving 3 to 7%, you know, improvements, are missing the 30% improvements in engineering, or how you take sales orders and start to funnel them through the system. So that's really critical. They watch the translation of customer requirements to technical requirements, and then technical requirements to a bill of material, the bill of material to the product and out the door. That's
Yeah.
really the essential thing to watch on the enterprise-wide value stream.
That's awesome. Tom, a question. What other conditions would need to be in place in order for, you know, operational excellence to be sustainable? Because you hit on something, and it's been my experience too. You know, I've been a part of an organization for, you know, 3 years or whatever, and right at that 3.5, almost 4 year mark, you find yourself solving the same issues you've done
Yeah.
before, and it's at that point where I'm like, okay, it's time to go, right? But how do you? I don't know if that will ever be fixed, but what other conditions would need to be in place in order for a company to have, you know, sustainable operational excellence?
Yeah, your leader at the top has got to be behind it and has got to want to do it. And by the way, has to be prepared for both the good and the bad of what gets exposed. And I've seen recently, you know, a small company where that leader is in place, and just it's amazing to watch, and people follow, because if they believe it, the rest of the organization will. That's the first one. The second one is I had it's about your culture of what you advertise in your results as red, green, or yellow. I eliminated yellow from everything about 7 years ago, because I had a leader say to me once, "Yellow is the coward's red," which which I thought was a really funny statement, because variation of yellow, the percent of the data that was that was allowed to be yellow, got bigger and bigger, right? So
Mm-hmm.
people were okay being yellow, but they weren't okay being red. So about 6 years ago, I started to create something called the culture of red. You have to be okay with the culture of red, because red isn't punitive. Red is that signal that says, help. I need help. When you walk by and you see red, when you look at those performance metrics and you see red, that means someone needs help. And if you see a long trend of red, that means a couple things. Maybe I'm setting my targets right. Maybe I don't have the capability to achieve that type of performance that I'm expecting to achieve. And this is really critical. You get your organization to do, you know, this kind of embrace the red, you know, culture. Then it also helps people, you know, really work together, because you are not punishing people for not performing properly. You're saying, what do I need to do to help you get past this and get to the targets that we think you can achieve? And that's critical. That's such a critical thing.
You know what, Tom? I love that you mentioned that, because that's something that we don't have a lot of. There's not a lot of content around that. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely, especially
Yeah.
if you're, you know, working at an enterprise PMO level, and you have
Right.
all your project managers submitting status reports, right? It's something about when that data gets aggregated.
Yeah.
There's an exercise between that yellow and the red, right? So like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
important to have that conversation.
Yeah, and so recently it's just red green to me, right? You're either on target and I don't need to worry about you, or I need to help you, and that's what I see. But for a lot of people that have known me for a few years that might watch this, you know that I really am seriously considering changing it to to the culture of fuchsia. Forget red, right? Everybody's got such a bad association with red, but fuchsia is that color that stimulates the right side of the brain, and
Yeah.
it creates, your creativity starts to really get engaged. So I'm close. I haven't really made it yet, but I'm going to get a culture of fuchsia going at some point.
That's
And if
awesome.
nothing else, it's going to be an article on LinkedIn at some
Yeah,
point.
exactly. Right. That's awesome. That's awesome. So as we move towards closing this out, are there any lessons learned out of your decades plus experience in operational excellence?
Yeah, I thought we had a limit on the time that we were going to talk, Brian. So we could go quite a ways,
Yeah.
right? I think probably the number one lesson to be learned is don't be afraid of failure. The amount that people learn from failure is so significant. And as long as we're failing little bits along the way, we're getting smarter. We're learning what we don't need to do again. And I think when you create this atmosphere of failing is bad, it can really be a detriment to the program.
Mhm.
The second one is if you're focused on cost savings, if you are just trying to cost as much down as you can, there's a guy named Seth Godin who's out there who talks about the race to the bottom. And
Yeah.
a cost program is nothing but a path to the race to the bottom. And you will cost your way out of competition, out of the market. And then that last one is it's got to be an enterprise-wide approach. I think some of the things that I saw early on in the 90s was so specific on function or product in a specific function that the results there were great, but they didn't translate left and right. So you've got to think about what's your input and what's your output. And to do that, you've got to look at the enterprise. And I was lucky enough in 2002 and 3 and 4 to be kind of leading this lean office initiative. And the place where I made sure that I tied to was manufacturing. That way, everything I did outside of manufacturing had a purpose,
Yeah.
as did manufacturing itself.
Yeah.
And that's what really kind of gave this broader view for GE as an operational excellence program across the enterprise. Whether the industry didn't matter is what happened, because if you're looking at the enterprise of a business, then that is all you need to be concerned with. It doesn't always matter the type of industry or the product. You are going to be doing this for a service, an information, or a product at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
if you can have an enterprise look at it, you'll be successful.
Awesome. 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 Tom, thanks again for providing us with your insight and your expertise. Really appreciate it. Where can the community find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to connect with people. And I learn from every single person that I connect with.
Yeah.
Right? We talk about this now being a connection economy,
Exactly.
and there is not a single person that I don't listen to that I don't learn something new.
Mhm.
So you can follow me on LinkedIn and connect, and we can send messages back and forth and talk, and that's probably the number one way to do it right now.
Awesome.
And maybe in the future I have some other paths, but I'm about to launch a podcast called Exempla in about another month, and
Okay.
that's going to be another place where you can go and listen to some of the things that I've learned over the years, and I'll have guests just like you're doing, where
Yeah.
we can share experiences. So that'll
Awesome.
be another thing soon.
Awesome. 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 Tom, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet, Brian. It was great talking to you. Good luck with everything that you're doing.
All right. Thanks.
All right, see ya.
All right.